able to go outside. You need to vary or be able to choose from a variety of skills. What I'd like to know is, would it have been more cost-effective to run a much larger team of PR experts, even though you wouldn't have been using them all the time? Would the hour rate of having,
Yes.
I don't know, both those numbers combined working permanently, would that have been cheaper and just as effective? And, I mean, that's the conversation we need to be having, not this is just a lot of money and what a waste.
Yeah, and that is a very good
communication.
That is a very good question to raise. Thank you. Ali Jones on the panel with a slightly beepy phone. We just want to mention before 5 o'clock this business of Winston Peters barred from a school bus. He was stopped, he says, by the Ministry of Education when trying to join school children on their bus to the Mangakahia area school at Titoki, northwest of Whangarei. And the community's been campaigning against the amount of dust thrown up from the unsealed roads in the area. And Winston suspects the directive was an edict from the National Party.
Was he perhaps not wearing correct school uniform? Because that would get you kicked off the bus when I was a kid.
Yeah, then it's a good question.
Tie might have been loose, shoes not clean. No, I've never seen Winston with not shiny shoes.
Didn't have his gold card. Would you like to know more? Because we have, I hope, Phil Reynolds on the line, principal of the Mangakahia area school. Phil, good afternoon. Well, hope was in vain for Phil. I don't know if we've got him.
If it's any help, I was at the press conference this afternoon when Nikki Kay was asked about this.
I was hoping you'd say I was on the bus. But
and she said that it was a matter of safety. She was informed by the ministry yesterday that Winston wanted to go on, and the reason they couldn't have him on is because the bus was full and a whole bunch of politicians and media would have created a safety issue, and she's very keen to work with Winston to get onto the bus at some point.
Do you buy that explanation fully, having heard it?
Not for a moment. If they'd wanted somebody on the bus, they would have kicked Brian and Phil off and popped him on.
Yeah,
Phil Reynolds is with us. Good afternoon, Phil.
Good afternoon.
Look, I know we haven't left you much time for this conversation, but what did happen with Winston not getting on the bus? I mean, what was your attitude towards it?
Oh, I didn't have an attitude at all. Apparently the direction was, and I'm not sure this is true, yet to be confirmed, there was a direction that he should not get on the bus, and he did not get on the bus.
Do you think, I mean, I suppose he will see it as, political interference, this edict that came down from the Ministry of Education. Do you think it was important that he get on the bus and see what all the dust kicked up by the bus travelling over the road to school?
I think it was important that if he's going to speak on the issue, he has the experience, but he doesn't have to travel on the bus to have that, although it's a lot better than travelling in the car, in the company of our fine students, of course.
Would the bus have been full with your fine students?
Well, in fact, the bus at the moment is oversubscribed, and we have to get a bigger bus, which is part of the issue.
That's what this is really about, isn't it?
Because a bigger bus on that road is even more vulnerable to an accident.
So the ministry may have had an argument about Winston and whoever else was going to hop on the bus with him overloading the bus?
No, there was no argument about that because we'd already arranged to provide alternative transport for students.
In the end, did Winston drive down the road behind the bus or not?
I believe he did.
And what conclusion has he come to about the state of the roads, do you know, Phil?
Well, I haven't gone to the other end of the road to see his impression, but certainly mine in making that journey a number of times is we have a dust out, can't see the road ahead, and it's, like many roads here, very dangerous, but more so for us because we have such a high number of our students come from that area, and it's such a busy logging road.
Is that the bus leaving now behind you?
No, that's the road they want to turn into a state highway that sits right out our...
Oh, gotcha.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, you've had probably useful publicity about the state of the roads, courtesy of Winston, haven't you today, Phil?
Well, it's not publicity that we've sought. It's the local action group that's really pushed this issue for a number of years. Our students have been involved in it. It's a social action that's appropriate for them as part of the community to be involved in. So that's where it sits.
Very good, and thanks for sparing us the time. Phil Reynolds, principal of the Mangakahia Area School. Bernard Hickey, nice to have you back on the panel today.
Cheers. Yeah.
Thank you. And Michelle Acorte, always a delight.
I love it here. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. The panel returns tomorrow, and soon to come, Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. Tonight, animal welfare. Do we take it seriously enough? And who's really in charge? Sky City's record profit and the extra pokies already added after its convention centre deal with the government. The critical shortage of maths and science teachers. Doc Hutt cheats sprung, and how effective are New Zealand's troop training efforts in Iraq? All of that and much, much more over the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The police say a driver who crashed during a pursuit this morning is a forbidden driver who was in breach of his bail conditions. A 5-month-old baby was found lying next to the car after it rolled on its roof outside the Coopers Creek winery near Kumeu. The baby was airlifted to hospital with its mother, who was a passenger in the car and has minor injuries. Inspector Mark Fergus says before the pursuit began, the police clocked the driver at more than 120 kilometres an hour. He says the 22-year-old reached speeds of up to 150 kilometres an hour during the 5-minute chase.
This is a man who, before police became involved, was already driving well in excess of the speed limit, putting the baby at risk. Once the police came to conduct enforcement actions, yeah, he was going to be in trouble for some stuff. But did it mean that he needed to put that 5-month-old baby at risk and the other members of the public?
Mark Fergus says the driver's under police guard and faces several charges, and you can hear more from Inspector Fergus on Checkpoint. The New Zealand First Leader is accusing the government of interfering in his work as an MP. Winston Peters has been barred from travelling on a school bus in his Northland electorate after the Education Ministry alerted the Associate Minister's office. The Minister, Nikki Kay, says it was an operational decision based on safety concerns, not a political one. But Mr Peters says he was going to take a bus trip today at the request of the Mangakahia Area School and parents who have been campaigning against dust from unsealed roads.
This is disgraceful behaviour. All they are designing this to do is to stop there being some sunlight on what has been decades of neglect up here. In this case, when it comes to the roads servicing these very important communities.
Winston Peters says electorate MPs visit social and economic services all the time without the need for ministerial approval. A judge has described the killing of a man in a Hamilton public toilet last year as brutal and callous, but not bad enough to mean prison for the rest of the offender's life. Because of the 3 strikes law, 26-year-old Ture Kingi could have been sent to prison forever when he appeared in the High Court in Hamilton today. However, Justice Wiley said that would have been manifestly unjust and sentenced him instead to life with a non-parole period of 13 years.
The brutality and callousness exhibited by you was not extreme when compared to the brutality and callousness of many like offenders. I have accepted that you acted impulsively and that your mental state at the time was such that your responsibility and culpability for your actions was diminished.
Justice Wiley said Kingi's early guilty plea and remorse were mitigating factors. The median price of a house in Auckland has fallen. Latest Real Estate Institute data show it fell by $50,000 to $720,000 between December and January. Hawke's Bay and Taranaki hit record prices, however, with the national median climbed by a seasonally adjusted 1.3%. The Institute's Chief Executive, Colleen Milne, says the regions are still benefiting from buyers and investors looking more beyond Auckland. She says the volume of sales in January was slower than normal, down by a seasonally adjusted 5%. A communications forum has been told of serious staff shortages hampering the rollout of ultra-fast broadband. The flagship government scheme, a joint venture with the private sector, is aimed at giving 99% of New Zealand homes peak speeds of 50 megabits per second by 2025. But the network company Chorus says it will have to double its workforce by the middle of the year to keep up with demand. This follows record demand in January. Vodafone says would-be fibre customers might just have to be patient. The country's biggest port is buying land near Hamilton for a new freight hub. Ports of Auckland has signed a conditional agreement to buy 33 hectares of land at Horatiu, just north of the city. The company says the hub will be an essential part of its supply chain strategy, and it's in one of the country's fastest growing areas. It says it plans significant investment in the site, and the first step will be establishing road and rail connections. A dead shark has washed up on a Kapiti Coast beach north of Wellington after sightings of sharks off the coast yesterday. The sightings near Peka Peka and Waikanai beaches yesterday afternoon drove swimmers from the water. The Department of Conservation says it was told this morning about a shark that had washed ashore on Te Horo Beach. It says it's not uncommon for dead sharks to be found on beaches and the tide usually takes them back to the sea. However, the Kapiti Coast District Council says heavy machinery is being brought in to help remove the carcass. In sport, as the curtain falls on his international career, the Black Caps captain, Brendan McCullum, admits it's only in the past couple of days that he started to reflect on his 14 years in the side. McCullum will become the first player in the history of the sport to play 100 consecutive tests when he takes the field against Australia in Wellington tomorrow. He says he looks back on what the team has achieved in the past couple of years with pride.
To be able to play 100 straight tests as well, pretty proud about the longevity and being able to overcome not just injuries but also the toughness of touring and the ups and downs of performance, and still being able to get back up off the canvas and still warrant a place in the team is something that you can look back on with a bit of pride. I'm looking forward to finishing these next 2 test matches. It's going to be a great series, and what better way to go out, I guess.
Brendan McCullum. Henry Nichols will make his test debut tomorrow and Doug Bracewell's in as the third seam bowler. That's the news.
Police chases.
A review needs to be done of it independently, so it's not the police deciding for the police.
PR spin or public service.
It's just so unfair. It's like Sarah is damned if they do and damned if they don't.
And a fish fight.
I put the challenge out to the PM, but that if he couldn't provide one witness of me fishing out of my boat, which is what his allegation was, perhaps he should back it up with paying to my charity.
A good catch. Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, Morning Reports, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, vets under pressure, concerns over the health and well-being of the profession caring for our animals. And after 10, Harvard Business School professor Amy Cuddy on her research into body language and how it can shape who you are. Lynn Freeman in for Catherine Ryan from 9 to noon, after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now to midnight tomorrow for Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, a few showers from afternoon, some possibly heavy today and isolated thunderstorms for Bay of Plenty. Waikato to Whanganui, including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape, mainly fine. A few evening showers inland today, possibly heavy, and the odd shower persisting in Waikato until morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Manawatu, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wellington, Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Mostly fine, however showers about the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne ranges in the afternoons and evenings, some heavy. Fiordland, rain, mainly about the fjords. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly fine, but areas of cloud morning and night. A few showers in the afternoons and evenings for inland Southland, eastern Otago and South Canterbury, possibly heavy. The Chatham Islands fine today, cloud developing tomorrow, a few showers later. It is now 5:08.
Thanks, Katrina. See you at 5:30 with the updated news headlines. We're going to go straight to where Katrina began the news at 5 o'clock. This is the police on the subject of a man who sped up to 150 kilometres an hour trying to evade them with a 5-month-old baby in the back seat. He was breaching bail and banned from driving. Police say Inspector Mark Fergus says an officer pulled the driver over because he was speeding through Waimoku, northwest of Auckland. He says the man stopped, but then took off and led the police on a 5-minute chase.
The vehicle crashed outside a winery in Kumeu and ended up on its roof. As police officers went to render first aid to the driver and passenger, they found lying next to the car the 5-month-old baby. So we immediately rendered assistance to the baby, moving it to safety and conducting first aid. The male driver was arrested at the scene. It was found that the 22-year-old driver was breaching his bail conditions and was on a number of active charges. It was also found that he was a forbidden driver. The driver's put himself, the baby and other innocent members of the public at risk by driving in such a manner. He's chosen to drive at speeds that, if indeed he has crashed, will put that baby at risk. The mother and baby were airlifted to the hospital. The mother's injuries are minor. The baby's injuries are not life-threatening. However, the baby is under observation and examination at Auckland Hospital.
Inspector Mark Fergus. Now, the police say the woman is the baby's mother, but it is not yet clear if the man is related to them in any way. Inspector Fergus says the driver is now under police guard and facing a number of charges.
This is a man who, before police became involved, was already driving well in excess of the speed limit, putting the baby at risk. Once the police came to conduct enforcement actions, yeah, he was going to be in trouble for some stuff. But did it mean that he needed to put that 5-month-old baby at risk and the other members of the public? That's the question he needs to ask himself. At the time, it's still a matter of we need to hold him accountable for the speed and the dangerous manner in which he is driving. So while he was fleeing from us, our officers constantly conducted a risk assessment. At the time, it was sufficiently controlled that we were able to continue following him.
What does
Unfortunately, what it means is we assess the risk to the members of the public as the fleeing driver continues.
So what's sufficiently controlled?
Well, and that the pursuing officers felt that there wasn't significant risk to the public, that they should immediately abandon.
There is a broad context, of course, for this week. Police pursuits have been very much in the spotlight. Just yesterday, the Independent Police Conduct Authority said it wanted the number of police pursuits reduced because too many young people are dying. In the past month, 3 teenagers have died after 2 separate pursuits. This afternoon, a 14-year-old boy who was allegedly the driver of a car involved in one of those crashes, this one in Masterton, has been charged with dangerous driving causing death. That just this afternoon, 5:11 on Checkpoint. Last night, we spoke to the SPCA about a near crisis in their ability to prosecute animal welfare cases. To put it simply, they don't have enough money. And to put that in perspective, the Ministry for Primary Industries typically receives somewhere up to 1,000 complaints a year about animal welfare. It's a branch of the state with an annual appropriation of $863 million. The SPCA, on the other hand, receives roughly 14 times more complaints. It's a charity dependent upon public donations and pro bono legal work. And when there are prosecutions, are the courts tough enough? This question has been asked off the back of animal hoarder Ann Power being allowed to keep 4 horses, 11 cattle, 18 sheep, 4 llamas, 4 dogs, 40 birds and 4 cats on compassionate grounds after being found guilty of recklessly ill-treating a horse that suffered a slow and painful death. The SPCA has now successfully prosecuted Ann Power 5 times over 13 years. To directly ascertain the condition of some of the dogs removed by the SPCA from her property, we went to see these animals. The vet I spoke to was Dr. Chelsea Vigilant. Chelsea, what have we got here?
So this is one of the older girls that in the group of dogs that we've seized. She probably has some of the most problems. Well, they all have problems, but she's got ear infections that have progressed so bad that she can't hear. She's deaf in both of her ears.
Would antibiotics have dealt with that early on?
When animals get ear infections, if they're dealt with, the sooner they're dealt with, the less detrimental they become. So ear infections we treat all the time, every day. Regular vets treat them all the time. This is chronic and has gone on a really long time untreated.
And she's now deaf?
Yes. And uncomfortable because ear infection dogs are very painful. Very painful.
What else is wrong with this girl?
She has mammary cancer, so breast cancer effectively, what a human would call breast cancer. In most of her mammary chains, because she's gone so long being undesexed. In female dogs, it's a common problem. She has a tumor on the back side of her also.
Can we see that?
Yeah, you sure can.
This is for people who are watching, but for people listening on radio, that is the size of a golf ball, really, isn't it?
Yep, it sure is. And it's this one we have no idea what it is, short of when we take a sample to find out, so we have no idea. The problem with mammary cancers are they usually metastasize. They're pretty nasty.
So this dog is really, really sick.
Yeah, yep, she is. She, on top of all of that, she doesn't really have any teeth left because she's chewed on hard substances. Could be rocks, could be really hard bones, but usually it's kennel bars if they're kennelled long term for long periods of time because they get bored and they have no entertainment. They'll chew on those kennel bars. And all of her teeth are ground down, so she has pretty nasty mouth too.
So the SPCA prosecuted the owner of these animals.
Correct.
And the district court allowed the owner of these animals to keep dozens of animals on compassionate grounds.
Correct.
How do you feel about that as a vet?
I think it's really hard for us because anyone who has these animals, we know they love them. Like their heart is potentially in the right place.
Is this what love looks like, though?
No, that's the thing. There is a problem when how you feel for them is how you treat them. And none of these dogs have been treated the way they should. None of them have gotten the medical care or the environmental enrichment, the behavioral enrichment. All of them were deathly afraid of us. They didn't even know what different flooring surfaces looked like before yesterday. And they've all come miles just letting us hold them and just letting us pet them and seeking out attention. So no matter what, there's only a certain amount of animals you can care for, and what is left is still a very, very large number. Usually, these cases, it's a mental issue, and they're going to continue to keep animals, more and more animals.
Can you show us other animals that you've picked up?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
We have a ton of them.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you very much. So we're just walking through the facility now. So where are we? So you've got lots.
Yep. So all of them are smaller. All of them are smaller dogs in this facility right now. There are some bigger dogs, Dalmatians included. You can tell all of them are slightly afraid or kind of socially inept, but we're working on that. They're already progressing just after being here for a short period of time. They've improved.
Have those dogs got cancer?
50% of the female dogs that we've checked here that are older, above 5 years old, that are undesexed, 50% of them have cancer already.
Okay, so this is a really big issue for you dealing with all of this.
Yes.
And what would the treatment of one seriously ill dog cost you in terms of labour, drugs, resources, surgery, the whole?
Oh, it can cost thousands, especially with these guys who have advanced diseases that take months and months of medications to actually get back to the healthy point. Some of these dogs won't get back to healthy point because they haven't had care in so long.
There's one girl along here that I'd love you to tell us about who I don't suppose we can use her name, but tell me about her.
So this is Nana, and Nana can hear, but Nana can't really see. She has an eye issues that have gone untreated, and because of the treatment, she's lost vision in those eyes. So she can see shadows. She knows there's something here. She can hear us and see that there's something here, but she doesn't know where. She also has mammary cancer. She also has terrible skin disease and terrible teeth. Like all of them, arthritis, pain, all of those things.
So this dog is practically blind. It seems to be limping. It has cancer and bad skin disease.
Yes, correct. All of those things. Now, and someone could say, well, as a dog ages, they get more and more medical problems. Yes, they do. Absolutely. You can treat many of those things, and you can manage them well, and none of these dogs have been managed well.
The sight issue, for example, had that been treated early on, would this dog have such bad vision now?
No, because we've already started treating her, and we can tell the state that her eyes are in, how dry they were, how painful they were, has already improved within 48 hours. So the problem is it's a constant treatment. She needs treatment. She needs those eyes medicated every day, and when you have 40-plus dogs, that's impossible.
All from the one owner?
Correct. You can't give them the medical attention they need. So hence she may have sought treatment for these dogs at one point in time, but the upkeep of them wasn't done.
Do we take animal welfare seriously enough, do you think?
The SPCA does, yes.
Do we as a country?
I think we could do better.
That's Dr. Chelsea Vigent from the SPCA. She's the chief vet. We'd love your feedback on this. The issue really is, should the woman who had those animals still be able to have animals? Should the SPCA be the lead agency prosecuting in New Zealand in its underfunded state animal welfare cases, animal cruelty cases? Should MPI be doing more? We'd love your feedback on all of it. You can text 2101, you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and our Facebook and Twitter handle is Checkpoint RNZ. 5:20. Children may be back at school around the country. They are, but there's a critical shortage of maths and science staff to teach them. Secondary school principals say they're taking more than a year to fill maths and science vacancies, and the University of Auckland says the situation is, in fact, approaching a crisis. They say too few maths and science graduates are choosing to become teachers, and schools are having to lure retired teachers back to the classroom to fill the gaps. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, filed this report.
Secondary school principals say a shortage of maths and science teachers has been getting steadily worse in recent years. The principal of Otahuhu College, Neil Watson, says it took his school more than a year to fill a senior chemistry teaching job.
We needed to find a new chemistry teacher, and it took us 18 months before we could actually find a chemistry teacher of the sufficient calibre which we need and expect from our teaching staff. And, that's a major issue.
Neil Watson says physics is even worse, and the college has employed a retired physics teacher part-time to take senior classes while it tries to find a full-time one.
There's lots of people out there with teaching qualifications and with physics in their degrees, but actually good quality physics teachers are very few and far between.
Another principal who asked not to be identified says his school hired a retired maths teacher for a half-year maternity leave job because the pool of applicants was so weak. He says it's hard to get good candidates even for full-time jobs, and so schools often have to hire maths or science teachers who need a lot of support.
They're putting teachers in who are a bit weaker. That means the school has to do a lot more work supporting that teacher, because we still want to make sure there's a good outcome for students in the classroom, but it puts a massive load back on the school and the other staff, the senior staff in the school, to support that teacher and finish off their training to bring them up to the standard we need.
The principal of Rangitoto College, David Hodge, says too few people apply for maths and science jobs advertised by his school, so it's forced to look overseas.
At the moment, we're fully staffed, but that's been at the school's expense. And looking forward, the situation is really dire.
Yeah. So do you fear then that there'll come a point you can't find someone?
Oh, look, absolutely. And I think already in the system that is the case.
David Hodge says for a variety of reasons, not enough people are training to be maths or science teachers.
One of those is that it will mean another year of adding on to their student loan, because they have to pay for the privilege to train. They're not earning while they're training, and so it's another year to go into a career that many of them might feel, I'm not really sure if this is me. I think it might be, but I'm not really sure.
The Education Ministry's Deputy Secretary for Early Learning and Student Achievement, Lisa Rogers, says it has a recruitment firm helping to fill vacancies.
We're literally scouring the nation and beyond for these teachers. We've got agents out there now, literally overseas, trying to entice, if you like, our New Zealand-trained teachers back to New Zealand, but also looking at how we get overseas-trained teachers, particularly in the UK, into New Zealand.
Lisa Rogers says there are currently 33 maths teacher vacancies and a similar number for science teachers. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
"5:22, just 9 days after fluoride was removed from Whakatane's water supply, the council has voted to put it back in, and it's now even looking at adding it in more areas. The U-turn at a specially convened meeting of the Whakatane District Council today hinged on just one vote. That's infuriated anti-fluoridation campaigners and added fuel to the campaign to take similar decisions out of the hands of local councils. What's going on here? Here's Rowan Quinn.
The man whose vote sealed Whakatane's fluoridation flip-flop, Councillor Gerard Van Beek, says he's simply had more time now to consider the evidence. He says when he voted last month to ditch fluoride, he was on the fence, so erred on the side of caution.
There's a lot of information around as to whether or not fluoride causes any harm, and the literature that I've read since the previous meeting sort of indicates that fluoride does little harm or possibly no harm. And in the absence that fluoride does no harm, then putting it into the water is rather neutral.
Today, with one councillor away sick, Mr Van Beek's change of mind was enough to get fluoride back into tap water in Whakatane and Ohope from as soon as tomorrow. A Whakatane anti-fluoride campaigner, John Burness, says he did not expect the decision.
I was devastated because the councillor who had been a proponent of removing fluoride turned around and changed his vote. I mean, the council has flip-flopped again. Another council flip-flopping.
He thinks Mr Van Beek was bullied by health authorities into changing his mind. But a pro-fluoride dentist in the town, John Twaddle, says that accusation could be levelled at the anti-fluoride groups, who bombard confused councillors with information, much of it emotive. He says he's overjoyed by the decision, but it was too close a call.
If anything else had happened, I would have been absolutely mortified, because I think it would have meant that whatever democratic processes were in place were being thwarted by a small, vociferous anti-fluoride group, and I don't think that's how really the democratic process should work.
Local government New Zealand is lobbying the government to have decisions like this taken out of the hands of local councils. And Whakatane's Mayor Tony Bon agrees, saying the decision was very difficult for councillors.
We won't be re-looking at this decision for a long, long time now, but I would say that we will be concentrating is supporting local government New Zealand to make sure that this scenario doesn't go all around the country and cost thousands of dollars of ratepayers' money to get decisions.
He says he's never seen such a passionate debate over an issue in his 18 years in local government.
I actually believe that, fluoridation is only a minor issue. It is something that polarises a certain amount of the community, and councils have got far more important things to carry on with.
But fluoride-free Whakatane says it will revisit the issue after a new council is elected this year. For Checkpoint, Rowan Quinn.
Sky City's deal with the government to allow it to extend its gambling operations in return for a convention centre appears to be paying off, with the company announcing a record profit today. The casino operator's first half profit soared up 30% to $71 million. In 2013, Sky City and the government tussled out a deal which gave the company the green light to have more pokies and extend its operating licence in return for building a $402 million international convention centre. The concessions to extend the company's gambling facilities kicked in November, and the company says early indicators are that its Auckland operations have benefited from them. Now, we wanted to discuss this with its chief executive, Nigel Morrison, but Sky City declined to speak to Checkpoint. Joining us now in the Auckland studios, the chief executive of the Problem Gambling Foundation, Graham Ramsey. Graham, welcome. How many more machines have Sky City got as a result of this deal with the government over the convention centre? How many are already there?
Okay, well, there are 1,647 machines that are there now, and as a result of this deal, Sky City get an extra 230 poker machines and 240 extra terminals because they're automating table games.
So table games, roulette, okay.
Yeah. So they're automating those, and they get an extra 12 table games as well.
And do you know how many have already turned up? So they've started arriving in November, right? What has the number of pokies increased by in that period?
I don't know that exactly. That's something to ask them, but certainly some of them are definitely already there.
Our understanding is it's in excess of 200.
Right.
So, okay. But this is in a way of less interest to you than the deal around the extension of the licence, because in 2021, prior to the convention centre deal with the government, what would have happened?
Well, under the Gambling Act, before their licence could be renewed, there was a process that was in the Act, and that process was that there had to be an independent study of the social and economic impacts on the city, which would have been very interesting, and a process also where Aucklanders and others would have been able to submit and say what they thought. So I don't think it was a foregone conclusion that they necessarily would have got an extension to the licence.
So this was going to take place in 2021, which is 5 years away.
Yes.
What happened under the convention centre deal?
Oh, that was bypassed. And the licence was just extended to 2048. And I think that was the big win for Sky City.
So the kind of conversations that you and I are having now about the impact of Sky City are taking place on the radio, but aren't taking place in any forum which can effectively hold Sky City to account or allow people meaningful submissions on what they perceive to be the impact of Sky City.
Correct. And we would have had some independent data and assessment about what the impact was, because we know that there is a cost from gambling, through problem gambling that affects large chunks of Auckland, and particularly poorer parts of Auckland, but we've got no independent assessment of what that is.
If we look at the new machines going in as a result of this deal, they started going in November. Is it too early yet for problem gambling to see an increase in people seeking help as a result of the extra machines?
Yes, I think it is a bit too early. We know that there's a relationship between accessibility and number of machines and problems that result, but right now I think it's too early for us to say.
Okay. Problem Gambling Foundation Chief Executive Graham Ramsey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your time. 5:30. Katrina will be here with the news headlines in just a sec, but quickly, retiring Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum will play his 100th consecutive test match for New Zealand against Australia tomorrow. That's a feat. The first player in the history of the game to achieve it. He held a press conference in Wellington today to speak of his memories and of his impending retirement.
I guess last few days you start to sort of think back on the times that you've had representing New Zealand, and the last 15, 20 tests have been just an incredible part of your life. I think the changes that we've been able to make and the evolution of the environment and the performances that we've started to put up, you look back with a sense of pride in what you've been able to achieve with a group of guys, and to be able to play 100 straight tests as well. You're pretty proud about the longevity and being able to overcome not just injuries but also the toughness of touring and the ups and downs of performance, and still being able to, I guess, get back up off the canvas and still warrant a place in the team is something that you can look back on with a bit of pride as well. But I'm looking forward to finishing these next 2 test matches. It's going to be a great series, 2 very evenly matched teams, I think, and what better way to go out, I guess. For me, the game's always been about in the change room afterwards, after you've been able to earn a test win in tough circumstances, and you've been able to overcome a very good opposition, and to be able to sit around and see that a group of guys have achieved something over 5 days, and to sit around with smiles on their faces, a bit of music going, and you got dirty whites and sweaty black caps and a beer in hand, and be able to look back on hard work achieved. That's what I got into the game for, and that's going to be the last memory of the game as well. From performance point of view, so I was from a team side of things, I thought the West Indies series away from home was a real. I looked at that series and I thought that was a defining moment for us as a team. It's not an easy place to tour, and to be able to get results over there was outstanding. And I didn't even get any runs, and I still look back on it fondly and think it was such a great step for our side. And obviously from an individual point of view, I used 300 out here, probably because what it meant to the people that followed or that follow this team and who have represented this team in the past. I'm never going to go down as a great player, but I think I've tried to play a role for the team which has made some contributions over the time, and I've been pretty strong with how I've gone about the style of cricket which I've tried to play throughout my career, and that can have its knockers as well, and at the same time, it can change a game too. So that's been one thing I've sort of looked back on fondly and say that I was able to maintain that even through times which were slightly adverse. But be nice to tick off a series win against Australia. We weren't able to do it away from home, but it'd be pretty special to do it at home as well.
Brendan McCullum, 100 tests on the trot. Incredible feedback coming in on animal welfare, animal cruelty. We'll bring you a good sample of it before 6 o'clock. But right now at 5:32, here's Katrina.
A man who crashed his car with a baby in the back seat during a police pursuit is under police guard while the 5-month-old recovers in hospital. Officers found the baby lying next to the vehicle after it rolled onto its roof outside the Coopers Creek winery near Kumu this morning. The baby was airlifted to hospital with its mother, who was a passenger in the car. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is accusing the government of interfering in his work as an MP after he was barred from travelling on a school bus in his Northland electorate. But the Associate Minister of Education, Nikki Kay, says it was an operational decision based on safety concerns. A judge has described the killing of a man in a Hamilton public toilet last year as brutal and callous, but not bad enough to mean prison for the rest of the offender's life. Because of the 3 strikes law, 26-year-old Ture Kingi could have been sent to prison forever when he appeared in the High Court in Hamilton today. Instead, he was sentenced to life with a non-parole period of 13 years. The Nelson police are responding to reports of a body being found in Stoke, south of Nelson City. A member of the public has reported finding the body at a house in Marlow Street. The median price of a house in Auckland has fallen by $50,000, but the latest Real Estate Institute data shows record median prices in Hawke's Bay and Taranaki. The Dunedin City Council has confirmed it's restarted a gang leader's gardening contract. The council suspended the $52,000 trial contract with a trust run by Albert Epere, a leader in the Mangukaha Black Power gang, in December after he was charged with dealing cannabis and driving dangerously. The council says it's giving Mr Epere another chance. I'll have more news, sport and weather at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. A retired vet of 25 years has raised serious concerns about the treatment of sheep held at the Alliance Group's meatworks plant in Stoke. Nelson, just outside Nelson. Peter Blasdale says he has lodged a complaint with MPI. Mentioned them a couple of times tonight, the Ministry for Primary Industries, but is not convinced it will get the traction he wants, which is better care for the sheep awaiting their fate, effectively. He told our Nelson reporter Tracy Neal what he saw when he drove past the works earlier this week.
On Tuesday, I was driving past the meatworks at about 1 o'clock and saw some sheep standing in the yard, and despite the fact that some screening had been put up to prevent people seeing in so easily, but there was still a little gap at the corner. I came back on my bike with a small camera on a stick so that I could take some photos from over the screen, and I could see the sheep still standing there. And it was very, very hot, no wind, very humid. You could see through this crack in the corner that a number of the sheep were panting. And I stood there for about half an hour, and eventually a guy came out who said he was a supervisor, and he said, what was I doing? And I said, I was just looking at the sheep. You know, I don't think it's very nice for them to be standing in the heat like that. And another guy came out, and the two of them moved the sheep around a bit and sort of moved them. There is a bit of shade, and they packed them in under that, but there were still quite a lot of sheep still in the full sun.
So this is the Alliance Meatworks Stoke plant we're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, the Stoke main road runs right past it, and there's a wire fence, and the sheep yards are just the other side of the wire fence. And for quite a while there's been some screening up there, but last week they put up some much thicker screening so that people couldn't see through it so readily, because when I spoke to... Because I made a complaint to MPI, and I was told that they'd had a few complaints already this summer. And
when did you make your complaint?
On Tuesday at 5 o'clock, because I went back on Tuesday at 4:20 with my video camera, and the sheep were still there, and I had a thermometer at that stage, and it was 28 degrees in the shade, and a lot of the sheep were still standing in the sun. Phil Bergman from MPI rang me on yesterday morning, took the details, quite a long conversation with him.
So Pete, do you live nearby? What alerted you to this, given that the meatworks have been there for a long, long time? What was it about this particular day that caught your attention?
Well, I knew there had been some complaints already, and I noticed last week that their response was to put up some better screening to prevent the public seeing so readily. And in fact, yesterday afternoon, their response probably to my complaint and my standing there and watching, their response was to put up more screening, sealing off the one remaining crack in the fence that people can see through now. So now you can't see in there. So I imagine, as far as they're concerned, they've solved the problem.
What would you like to see happen?
Well, from the heat point of view at this time of year, they need a bit of shade, really, and that would be easily catered for. I think what happens is sometimes they put all the sheep into the yards there, and I think there is a procedure where they're washed. Okay, so when they're wet, that helps cool them down. But if Meatworks line stops working for any reason, which I think had happened on Tuesday, I believe, and there'll be records about this, the sheep are still standing there and can stand there for a very long time, and that yard has got no wind, full sun, and on a hot, humid day, as I say, when at 4:20 it was 28 degrees in the shade.
That's a retired vet, Peter Blasdale, talking to our Nelson reporter, Tracy Neal. Kerry Stevens is the General Manager of Processing for the Alliance Group. I asked him if the sheep in the yard had been treated appropriately.
Yes, they are.
We've got systems in place that are quite sophisticated systems that ensure that we meet all of the animal welfare codes and all of the regulations. Those systems involve we monitor the time that the animals move through the system. Also, all of our staff are trained in animal welfare procedures. We've got an animal welfare officer on site. Our systems and procedures are validated by the Ministry for Primary Industries to also ensure that we comply with all the relevant codes. And on site at all times while we're processing, there's an MPI veterinarian who also checks that we follow all of the procedures that are in our system. So we think we've got very robust processes in place.
So what's the longest a sheep or any animal can be out the front in the sun for?
Generally, it's less than 4 hours, because the pens, the yards that they're referring to is not the entire holding system. The bulk of the animals are held indoors, and those pens that you're referring to are just the initial pens that the animals pass through as they go into the plant.
So generally, it's less than 4 hours.
Yeah, and
What's
at
the
all
longest?
times they have access to drinking water.
Okay, shade? Do they have access to shade?
There's some shade. On one side, there's a fence that provides shade during certain periods of the day. But at other times, that's not the case.
Okay. The man that contacted us has been a vet for 25 years, and he says he doesn't regard this as satisfactory.
Right. What's really important here, John, is that there are regulations in place. It's in our interests that animals are treated well. And we follow all those regulations. And so we have the systems, the procedures, the controls, the trained people, and as well as that, we have MPI oversight at all times that animals are there. So we're fairly confident and very confident that our systems meet all of those requirements.
Not so confident that you're prepared for people to see the yard. It looks like you've put some screening up, Kerry.
The screening's been there for a number of years. It's there for two reasons at that particular site. The yards that we're talking about are adjacent to quite a busy road. They're immediately adjacent to quite a busy road. So the screening was put up quite a number of years ago for twofold purpose. One was to minimise any distress that animals might suffer because of cars and particularly trucks and that passing by at what is reasonably close proximity. And as I said, that also provides at certain times of the day an element of shade across the yards as well. So
it must be a small element of shade, because the screening is just large enough for people not to be able to see over the top of it. In summer, of course, the sun is directly above, isn't it? It's directly overhead.
And that's why I say only at certain times of the day.
Right. What times of the day in particular?
Well, when the sun is low.
Right. So which would be when you would need less shade, right?
Possibly so, yes.
I mean, ideally you would have shade when the sun was at its hottest.
But as I say, the main reason this shading was originally put up was around the proximity of the animals to the roadway and the potential for distress caused by traffic passing by.
What this man said to us was he was caught looking through a gap in the screening, and then when he went back later, the gap had gone. And I wonder if you are trying to stop people from seeing these animals in this yard, in the sun, without the shade.
Again, John, I can't comment on the specifics of this complainant, and we're yet to speak to the complainant. But again, what I can say is that we have the systems in place, we have the regulatory oversight, we have the constant presence of MPI vets at all times. That's our primary means of ensuring we meet requirements.
Kerry Stevens, who is the General Manager there at Alliance in Stoke. The Ministry of Primary Industries declined to be interviewed tonight. Its District Compliance Manager for Nelson Marlborough is Ian Bright. He says the MPI has received 3 complaints regarding stock in the yards at the Alliance plant at Stoke in December, January and on February 9. He says an animal welfare inspector has visited the plant on each occasion and found no evidence of offending under the Animal Welfare Act. There was no evidence of, quote, unreasonable or unnecessary pain or distress, end quote, among the stock. Inquiries around the February 9 complaint found the sheep had been washed prior to being put in the yard and had access to fresh water. The sheep had been monitored at 3:15 p.m. and appeared non-stressed and relaxed. MPI says while there was no evidence of offending, the Animal Welfare Inspector met with management at the plant plant yesterday to discuss the concerns from 3 complainants. He says MPI received an email from the company this morning outlining the planned addition of a fine water misting unit to make the wait for stock more comfortable. 5:44. Turning now to business news with Jonathan Mitchell. Jonathan, welcome. Again, we're going to be looking at insurers tonight.
That's right. It's a story about the challenges facing the insurance industry, John. We've had half-year results from Vero and AA Insurance. Profit to the end, 6 months end, December. That fell to $83 million. Now, competition for pricing and setting aside more for quake claims are the challenges there. Vero actually mentioned a bit about their quake claims 5 years on from the February 2011 earthquake. They've settled 89% of those claims, $4.7 billion worth. The remaining claims that they've got to settle, they hope to do that by the end of the year. So this leads me on to Tower, who held their annual meeting today. You may remember last year they had a loss of $7 million after higher quake claims. Today they say they're going to cut the number of products they offer from about 150 to 20, and that's in an effort to reduce costs and improve performance. So you'd have to say quake claims at the front of minds for insurance companies as we speak.
Yeah. Jonathan, last evening when we were talking, you mentioned Janet Yellen was going to speak on behalf of the Fed. What did she say and what has it done in the US and elsewhere, I guess?
I'll get to those comments in a moment, but first, that word volatility we've been talking about a lot lately, that's continuing. This afternoon, the big losses came from Hong Kong. At last look, a few minutes ago, that was down 4%. Yes, Wall Street fairly flat after
So the Hong Kong market is off 4% in a day?
As we speak, they've open trading this afternoon. They're down. The biggest loss this afternoon for trading on the stock exchanges around the world that I can see. Wall Street fairly flat after those comments by Janet Yellen. She left the door open for interest rate hikes. When? We still don't know. We don't have a clear idea. She gave a fairly balanced view of the US economy, but conceded that there are headwinds. Those will mainly come from overseas. So overall, you'd have to say Wall Street wasn't spooked, but there wasn't nothing to get too excited about. We still don't know and have any clear guidance on when rates will rise. So we'll have to just put a watch and see on that one.
Oh, yeah, boy, there's lots of those around at the moment. What's the New Zealand market's done today?
That's right. Well, going to our market, it ended down 0.5%, 32 points to 5987. The dollar was a bit volatile today too, currently trading at 66.6 US cents and 94 Australian.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Big falls in Asia, incredible. 4% in Hong Kong, 5% in Tokyo earlier, in Japan earlier in the week. 5:47 on Checkpoint. Staff shortages look likely to hamper the government's flagship ultra-fast broadband rollout. Much touted, of course. The telecommunications industry was told at a major conference today that only half the required workforce is available for installing the new network. The scheme is a flagship program for the government, which it campaigned strongly on in the 2008 election, and it says fast internet speeds will help the economy, but there are simply not enough skilled workers to do the job. Here's Eric Frickberg.
The government wants 99% of New Zealand homes to be able to get peak speeds of 50 megabits per second by 2025. But getting that sort of speed is being stalled because not enough skilled workers are available to install the fibre. That's according to Mark Ratcliffe, the chief executive of Chorus.
We don't have enough technician resources to meet the work that's coming through. We need probably, I would think, twice as many technicians as we've currently got working by the middle of the year.
Other speakers at the forum attributed this problem to the very success of the fibre program, which has soared ahead of similar ventures in many other countries. Spark's chief executive Simon Muter said it had taken 100 years to roll out a copper network, and he suggested it was ambitious to do fibre in just 6. Vodafone's chief executive Russell Stanners told the forum would-be fibre customers might just have to be patient and wait for their turn to come around.
What it does mean is consumers probably through the peak update period are going to have to wait longer than they've waited historically. In fact, as an industry, we have to educate people that it's not the world we used to have. We don't just turn something on in a computer. We are physically, as mentioned, going out to homes, changing things.
According to Mark Ratcliffe, it takes up to 6 months to train a technician to install fibre, and the work isn't easy.
This is a construction job on every single premise in New Zealand. It's not somebody sitting behind the keyboard flicking some switches to activate a service. It's a reasonably complicated job. You've got to deal with connecting into a network and connecting into people's living rooms. So you've got to have a reasonably sophisticated guy that goes and does that.
Mr Ratcliffe says the demand for the installation of fibre last month was a record, and February is shaping up to be another record. Similar remarks came from a smaller IT company, Enable. Meanwhile, the Minister of Communications, Amy Adams, couldn't be reached for comment. The ultra-fast broadband initiative is a joint venture between the government and 4 ICT companies. For Checkpoint, Eric Frickberg.
10 to 6. A woman's been seriously injured after a digger caught fire on Wellington's south coast. This is all unfolding as we speak. The fire near the landfill on Happy Valley Road has spread to nearby pine trees, and firefighters are now there. So too is our reporter Adriana Weber. Adriana, what's happening?
Hi, John. Well, yes, there is huge, thick plumes of smoke coming out from above the trees here on Happy Valley Road. Those familiar with Wellington would know that it's just above the mini golf course called Colucci Land, actually, and firefighters, because it is sort of on a slight hill, are having a bit of trouble getting access to that fire to try to contain it. So what we do know is that someone has been transferred to Wellington Hospital, as you say, in a serious condition, and a digger had caught fire. There are at least about 5 or 6 fire trucks here. There's an ambulance, 2 ambulances in fact here, and lots of people crowding around, getting a good look at all the thick smoke coming up from the trees, and, emergency services flat out trying to contain it.
Adriana, do you know what's happening with the road? Is it open or closed?
It is closed, so a big section of Happy Valley Road is closed, so traffic is being ordered to do a U-turn and go back into the town side of the road.
Adriana Weber from Happy Valley Road, just heading down towards Wellington South Coast. Thank you so much, Adriana, and we'll update you on the condition of the woman who has been seriously injured once we know any more. A group of trampers has been rumbled booking bunks for a dozen non-existent infants in an apparent attempt to keep an entire backcountry hut to themselves. Waitawheta hut in the Kaimau Range in the Bay of Plenty sleeps 26 people, right? 26 in the hut. And that's the number volunteer dock ranger Headley Timms was expecting when he turned up a few Saturdays ago. 26 people had booked. The visitors that night supposedly included 12 infants. Now, if you're an infant, you can stay free of charge. So 26 had booked, 12 of them were infants. But instead of 12 squealing babies, Mr. Timms discovered 12 empty beds that could have been used by other people instead, who were being excluded by these imaginary infants. What did he see in the hut? I asked him.
There was a group in the hut, and they were obviously a group made up of 3 families. They all knew each other, and all the kids were playing together and whatnot, and so that was all well and good. And so I had a bit of a yarn to them, and then, as I normally do, just went and had dinner, and then I go back in the evening to see if anyone else had arrived, because I was expecting the Saturday night to be full, but no one else had arrived. There's still just that one group, which was surprising. So I asked, who was the leader, and could I have your tickets, or a ticket actually, because now they print them out from the dock website, and they get their ticket or their receipt, and it had, paid for 14 beds. And then infants, next to infants was 12. And so that was sort of explained, and the penny dropped as to why there was no other guests in the hut that night. This group had sort of cheekily gone and put 12 in the infant column on their booking form so that the entire hut would be booked out.
Right, so Headley, there's 26 beds in the hut. Yeah. There were 14 in the group, and they were using those beds, leaving 12, but they'd written down in their booking form that they were bringing 12 infants with them. Yeah.
Actually, I believe there was only 12 of them in the group, but they had paid for 2 extra adults. And so when I sort of raised my eyebrows a little, I sort of said, where
are the infants? Where are the 12 infants?
Yeah. And they said, no, there's more people coming, but I think their car broke down.
So that was a lie.
Well, and I was like, I smelled a bit fishy, So really, it was a case that was a bit uncomfortable.
You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to smell fish there, do you, Headley? 12 missing infants.
Yeah.
So these people were actually just taking the mickey, weren't they?
Yeah, they were definitely that sort of personality type of people who were just having it their way, really. And so anyway,
so selfish is a word that springs to mind.
Yeah, impressively selfish, really, because they had a lot of gall, and then the guilt did kick in, and they were offering me wine and their nibbles, and then they brought around some of their dinner for me later, and I didn't partake, but
because you can't be bought, can you? You can't be bought, Headley.
Sorry?
You can't be bought by chicken and wine, can you?
But the next day, obviously the guilt had kicked in because the hut was spotless when they left.
Okay, so do you think this happens very often, or are you hoping that this group of thoroughly selfish, self-centred, self-obsessed individuals is a one-off?
Well, I'm sure it happens in these huts where Doc just has the volunteer hut wardens like myself, because I was the first hut warden in Waitawhara Hut, according to the hut warden's book, since New Year's.
Okay, so what's that? So we're talking 5 or 6 weeks, right?
Well, no, 3 weeks at least.
Yeah. Okay, right. And so actually, if you are going to do stuff like this, the odds are that you're not going to meet anyone who's going to check up on you.
Yeah, and it'll probably just be a hut warden in the weekend, if you're sort of unlucky or lucky.
So Headley, can you respond to this in terms of the ethos of a dock hut? Is it appropriate that people behave this way?
I think it's quite sad, really, that people behave that way, because the whole part of the experience when you go for a tramp is the unexpected, or one who's going to be in the hut, and you're going to have to adapt, you modify your behaviour, get along with other people, meet new people, and especially in that hut, because it's such a popular one with young families taking their kids on their first overnight tramps and stuff like that. So when someone tries to make it their own little empire in the bush and book it out for their whole group, it takes away the opportunity of interaction with other people, and it's just unfair, really.
There could be a bigger story, of course. There could be 12 missing infants, but we don't think that's the case, and nor does DOC. Their head office has called us back with a statement. They say one of the families staying in the hut has called to say sorry. Ross Shearer, who's DOC's commercial manager, says the department's still working through the details, but it looks like there may have been some genuine booking confusion involved. They're very nice, the people at DOC. 3 minutes to 6, 30,000 Syrians fleeing an offensive in Aleppo have gathered at the Turkish border in hopes that Ankara will let them across. Here's Manarabi from Reuters.
Aid workers helping some 30,000 Syrian refugees amassing at a border gate with Turkey in just a few days. The Syrians are escaping a major offensive in Aleppo by Russian-backed Syrian government forces. But Turkey, already hosting 2.5 million Syrian refugees, has kept its frontier closed to this latest wave of displaced, saying the refugees get the help they need for now on the Syrian side of the border.
We thank Erdogan and we hope that he opens the border so we can cross over with our families and the ill. Our life is very difficult here.
The mass migration out of Aleppo is one of the most important shifts in Syria's 5-year civil war. European Union lawmakers want Turkey to say if it's opening up its border to the Syrians, even as tens of thousands more are thought to be on the move to this border gate.
That report from Reuters was a visual report. Obviously, you could hear what was going on, but the pictures of all those people waiting for some kind of future. 1.5 minutes to 6, let's have some feedback. So much of it coming in around the issue of animal welfare, the SPCA, and the case of Ann Power. Time, Britta says caging dogs permanently is not only physical but also mental and emotional torture. Pet dogs live for the social bond with us. Caroline says welfare code for farm animals is miserably inadequate and not policed. If only people knew. New Zealand needs to take a hard look at its animal welfare and our attitude towards how we treat animals. MPI is a joke. The animals need an independent voice. The SPCA cannot do the work that is needed as they do not have the resources. They are the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. They certainly try very hard. Thank you, John, for putting the case of the animal hoarder as the second report on your show. This woman has a notorious history of animal abuse. What will it take to have a total animal ban put in place, asks Ross. It's disgraceful that MPI are not funding SPCA for these prosecutions, says Alan. We actually want to talk to MPI and the Minister Nathan Guy about the work SPCA are doing. 14 times the number of animal welfare complaints go to the SPCA that go to MPI. MPI's annual appropriation about $860 million. The SPCA, of course, a pro bono legal team, charity, fundraising, and yet they are disproportionately shouldering the burden of animal welfare prosecutions in New Zealand. The Minister declined the invitation to be interviewed about that this evening. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. We are delighted to have you with us, however you are listening or viewing us. Thank you for being here. Coming up in the next half hour, Winston Peters on why he's seeing red over a bus ban, why 9 Christchurch preschools could have their budget slashed, and the nitty-gritty of ratifying TPP gets underway in Parliament. But first, it's 6 o'clock and here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. A man who crashed his car with a baby in the back seat during a police pursuit today is under police guard while the 5-month-old recovers in hospital. Officers found the baby lying next to the vehicle after it rolled on its roof outside the Coopers Creek winery near Kumu this morning. The baby was airlifted to hospital with its mother, who was a passenger in the car and has minor injuries. Inspector Mark Fergus says the man was driving at speeds of up to 150 kilometres an hour.
The male driver was arrested at the scene. It was found that the 22-year-old driver was breaching his bail conditions and was on a number of active charges. It was also found that he was a forbidden driver.
Mark Fergus says the police started chasing the man because he was speeding. Secondary school principals say they're taking more than a year to fill maths and science vacancies as a critical shortage of teachers bite. The Secondary Principals Association says its members are desperate, and the Auckland University says the situation is approaching a crisis. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Secondary principals spoken to by RNZ News say many of the maths and science applicants they get are just not up to the job, and schools are having to lure retired teachers back to the classroom to fill the gaps. They say too few maths and science graduates are choosing to become teachers, and the situation has been getting worse. The Education Ministry says it has a recruitment firm helping to fill vacancies and agents working overseas to recruit British teachers and encourage New Zealand teachers to return. This is John Gerritsen.
The SPCA, which has just removed another 45 dogs from an owner, says the country could do better at looking after its animals. It collected the dogs, most of which were in a terrible condition and very sick, from the property of Auckland woman Anne Power, after a court ruled she had to give up dozens of animals. SPCA vet Chelsea Vigent says many of the dogs have cancer and other serious conditions. She told John Campbell they should not have been allowed to be treated in such a way.
There is a problem with how you feel for them is how you treat them, and none of these dogs have been treated the way they should. None of them have gotten the medical care or the environmental enrichment, the behavioral enrichment. All of them were deathly afraid of us. They didn't even know what different flooring surfaces looked like before yesterday.
Chelsea Vigent of the SPCA. The Whakatane District Council has backtracked on a decision made only last month to take fluoride out of the town's water supply. Fluoridated water will still be flowing from taps again as early as tomorrow. The Mayor, Tony Bond, says it will not be revisiting the decision, which should not have been left up to councillors in the first place. One person has been seriously injured after a digger caught fire on Wellington's south coast. The fire then spread to nearby pine trees on the urban fringe of the city in the suburb of Ofero Bay. Wellington Free Ambulance says one person has been taken to hospital in a serious condition. Firefighters are working to get access to the blaze on Happy Valley Road near the city landfill. A 52-year-old man who was fatally struck by a train while cycling in Christchurch this morning was a member of the city's symphony orchestra. Richard Chandler died after colliding with the train shortly after 8 o'clock at the crossing on Fendleton Avenue. The police say the barrier arms and signals were working at the time. Mr. Chandler was associate principal bassoon player in the orchestra, having first played with it in 1983. His death has been referred to the coroner. The police say the death of a person found in a burning car in a lay-by of State Highway 1 in Marlborough 4 days ago is not suspicious. The police say investigators believe the death was the result of an accident, but the victim has not yet been identified. The death has been referred to the coroner. The retiring New Zealand cricket captain Brendan McCullum says it's team moments he'll cherish rather than any individual records when he leaves the game. McCullum will play his 100th consecutive test for New Zealand against Australia tomorrow, the first player in the history of the game to achieve the feat. He says a series win in the West Indies rates highly for him, while the obvious individual highlight was his triple century against India 2 years ago.
The game's always been about in the change room afterwards, to be able to sit around and see that a group of guys have achieved something over 5 days, and to sit around with smiles on their faces, bit of music going, and you got dirty whites and sweaty black caps and a beer in hand, and be able to look back on hard work. That's what I got into the game for, and that's going to be the last memory of the game as well.
Brendan McCullum. Canterbury batsman Henry Nicholls will make his test debut, replacing the injured Ross Taylor, while Doug Bracewell's the third seam bowler. Another administrative bungle in football is keeping the Wellington Phoenix's new striker Alex Jones off the field for now. The Phoenix have confirmed the loan deal for Jones from Birmingham City has yet to be cleared by FIFA, so he'll almost certainly miss Sunday's visit to A-League leaders Western Sydney Wanderers. It's not an ideal situation for Phoenix assistant coach Chris Greenacre.
There's just paperwork to be sorted out. I just deal with the team on the training field. But yeah, things are just being finalised, and it's just with the lap of the gods at the minute. It's just one of those things, and as I say, it's out of my sort of department, and paperwork's not my formality, so we'll just wait and see for that.
Chris Greenacre. Hawke's Bay United striker Hamish Watson has joined the Phoenix on a short-term deal. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Jeremy Moss on what happens when black holes collide. We have a window on the word of Colonel Gaddafi's golden gun. Didn't do him much good. Cliff Fowle discusses the life and poetry of Walt Whitman, and our changing world tries out some brain food.
The higher the level of omega-3 fatty acids in your blood, the better the B vitamins work at slowing the brain shrinkage.
Celebrate the brain and body electric with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, a few showers from afternoon, some possibly heavy today, and isolated thunderstorms for Bay of Plenty. Waikato to Whanganui, including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Mainly fine, a few evening showers inland today, possibly heavy, and the odd shower persisting in Waikato until morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Manawatu, Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wellington, Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Mostly fine, however showers about the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne ranges in the afternoons and evenings, some heavy. Fiordland, rain, mainly about the fjords. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly fine but areas of cloud morning and night. A few showers in the afternoons and evenings for inland Southland, eastern Otago and southern South Canterbury, possibly heavy. The Chatham Islands fine today, cloud developing tomorrow and a few showers later on. It's 6:07.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Have a lovely evening. Winston Peters seeing red over being barred from a school bus in his Northland electorate. Mr Peters says he was going to take the bus trip today at the request of the Mangakahia area school and parents who've been campaigning against dust from unsealed roads, but he was foiled after the Education Ministry alerted the Associate Minister's office. The Minister, Nikki Kay, says it was an operational decision based on safety concerns, not a political one. Mr Peters is on the line from Northland. Welcome back to the program. Mr Peters, were you going to try and drive the bus?
No, the parents asked me to go onto the bus and experience what their children are being subjected to. The headmaster agreed. The bus driver was happy for that to happen. So was the bus company. The only obstruction came from the Minister's office and the Education Department.
How do you know that's the case? What happened for the Minister's office to know about it?
Well, she has given the excuses, and this is what they are. First of all, it was a safety issue. Second, the bus had no space on it. Third, you can't have a bunch of politicians on a school bus. And fourth, that it wasn't part of the contract. All of those statements are absurd.
Can we come to statement 2, because that's the one we can most easily verify. Were there seats? Was there a spare seat for you on the bus?
Yes, there is. There were, and I've got photographs of that bus, and so have the media.
Okay, so what's going on here? First of all, the Prime Minister's having a go at you, suggesting that you're actually not a local MP, you're really just a fisherman. Then you're banned from a school bus, which you're trying to get on as the local MP. Are you becoming a victim of kind of moderately dirty politics?
It's not moderately dirty, it's just plain petty bullying and arrogance of the worst sort. If you go through those excuses, none of them stack up. And above all, how is an MP to respond to their constituency when there are legitimate concerns? You've got to get on that road and you'll see how bad it is. But trucks were coming by, fully loaded with logs. As they go past, there's a huge cloud of dust. The bus driver can't even see. And this has been going on. The lady who brought it to my attention has been going on about this, rightly so, Alex Wright, on Wright Road, rather, for 12 long years. And it just shouts neglect and contempt and a desire to do nothing, and yet to explain away that when anybody else tries to do something, that they've got some legitimate cause when there is no grounds for it whatsoever.
Can you quickly tell us where we are here? How far north are we? What's the nearest town?
You go Whangarei, go out to Mangarapere on the way to Dargaville, cut right to Mangakahia, towards, some people are going towards Pepiwai side, and that's about where you're talking about.
Okay, and how long's the road in this kind of condition for the school bus journey?
For the whole of it.
Right. And how long's it been like this for?
Well, it's been like this for a long, long time. But when you had the harvesting of logs and coming through that road, and there were trucks with car tyre marks on it coming through that road, when you've got the railways run down from Wakaiau, where they should be loaded on to those rail lines, and all that infrastructure collapsing, you would expect the government to respond. But no, their reaction was petty in the extreme, and Minister Kay saying that just won't wash.
Winston Peters, thank you so much. Winston Peters, who is, of course, the local MP in the Northland electorate. We will try and get a response from the Minister's office, although it's 11 minutes past 6, so we may be out of luck, but we'll certainly give it a go. Winston Peters. Heading into the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Hearings into the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement have got underway today. New Zealand's Chief Negotiator David Walker appeared before the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Select Committee at the start of the parliamentary process to ratify the TPP. Of course, all the people who've signed the TPP are going through this, all the 12 countries. Dr. Walker reiterated that the agreement would benefit New Zealand. It's a consistent message by lowering trade barriers and boosting the country's income over time. And with other Pacific Rim nations intending to join up, he says New Zealand cannot afford to be left out.
TPP gives New Zealand the opportunity to help shape future trade liberalisation in its home region. Chair, the counterfactual scenario, New Zealand standing aside from the opportunities of TPP, risks marginalisation and decline for New Zealand in the region. New Zealand's competitiveness in TPP markets would be eroded, and trade and investment would be diverted away from New Zealand to other TPP members.
Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara was at today's committee. He's followed this story throughout, of course. Patrick, welcome back to the program. Labor's David Clark said the hearing focused on the government's sales pitch. It sounded a little bit like it there from David Walker. Is that the case from what you heard and saw?
Well, certainly for the first hour, John, yes, it was. The Dr. Walker just really effectively went through the national interest analysis, and which pointed out obviously a lot of the benefits to the deal. Partway through that, around halfway through that, Mr. Clark then stopped him and asked the chair, Mark Mitchell, well, look, is this all it's going to be? We're just going to hear about this sales pitch for the deal. Are we going to get a chance to ask questions? At that stage, look, they let him get through his opening remarks, which went on for an hour, and then we actually did get in and questions were asked.
What sort of questions did MPs ask?
Well, I think that question around firstly was around the economic analysis. And of course, as you remember, it's estimated that it's going to be worth $2.7 billion a year by 2030 in benefits. David Clark, again, was leading a lot of this. He wanted to know, well, had they looked at some of the other studies that have been put out, including by TPP opponents, but also this Tufts study, this Tufts University study, which has come out and effectively said, actually, TPP, yes, there'll be export benefits, but it's also going to cost jobs in New Zealand, up to 6,000, and it estimates that it's going to drive wages down. Now, when Dr. Walker was asked about that, he said he hadn't looked at, or MFAT hadn't looked at any of the other analysis, but they did say that they would undertake a view or go and have a look at those and report back to the committee. Another important thing that they looked at was this concerns around foreign firms being able to sue governments, this ISDS provisions. Now, Dr. Walker was adamant and quite strong and robust in defending the government's ability to be able to do this, and also to legislate it in the public interest. And he certainly said that the hurdle was very high for investors wanting to take any action. And the third one, of most import, was around this issue that Labor has got around the right of future governments to be able to ban foreigners from housing. Now, there was a real to and fro between the two of them, as Dr. Walker refused really to answer the question about whether negotiators had sought to put a ban in place. He effectively said that they had defended the current investment regime, which doesn't include the right to ban, but they also managed to get new rights to be able to introduce discriminatory taxes. And Dr. Clark, David Clark, he took that to mean actually no.
Just quickly before we go, was it getting heated in there or not?
Oh, it was a little bit argy-bargy at times,
Yeah.
and I think it was really the government side of the House were all very keen to talk about all the good things about the deal. Labor, on the other hand, and the other opposition MPs, they were keen to kind of point out, well, actually, there's some holes in this, and this doesn't really stack up all that well.
Yeah, there's the surprise. Patrick O'Mara, thank you so much. Our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara. It is 16 minutes past 6. 9 Christchurch preschools could have their budgets cut dramatically following a City Council decision today to remove guaranteed funding. Most of the centres are in struggling neighbourhoods and all are run by their communities on a not-for-profit basis. Our Christchurch local government reporter, Conan Young, has been talking to some of those affected by today's decision.
One of the centres at risk of losing its $30,000 rent subsidy is the Kids First Kindergarten in Aranui. Chief Executive Cheryl Wilson says it's in the city's most deprived community and raising fees to meet a possible shortfall is not an option.
We're going to have to sit down and relook at our budgets, relook at our ability to provide the quality service that we're giving to those families in Aranui, if in fact we can continue to give that early childhood high quality program that we offer at the moment.
Cheryl Wilson says as a large not-for-profit organisation, Kids First is in a better position than most to absorb the extra costs that may come their way as a result of today's decision. But she worries about the other 8 preschools in the council's sites that are standalone centres run by parents and volunteers.
This is going to really push them, I believe, whether they can retain offering these services to the people of Christchurch after all. So they will have to do some real soul searching.
Jason White is the chairperson of the Board of Trustees at Moa Kids, a community-run not-for-profit preschool in Redcliffs. He says removing its $30,000 rent subsidy would be a cruel blow to a community that is already fighting to save its primary school from being closed by the government.
I don't think the community would be willing to accept it at all. Yeah, look, I think if the community got wind that they were losing another community resource in the Bay Area, I think we could see a big turnout.
Jason White worries Moa Kids could be a prime candidate to lose its funding because of perceptions the area is well-to-do.
The perception might be that we've got more money than other areas, but families in this part of the area are often doing it just as hard as other areas in Christchurch. Well, our case is that we're the only one in this Greater Bay Area offering this resource. It is a different option for parents to go for a community preschool.
None of the 3 preschools RNZ News spoke to had been consulted by the council before today's decision, and all were shocked it would make such a major decision without talking to them first. The councillor chairing the working group that proposed the change, Andrew Turner, says at the moment money only goes to the centres because they occupy council-owned buildings and not on the basis of need.
This has been funding which has essentially been ring-fenced for these organisations, has been granted year on year on year, without any competitive application process.
Andrew Turner says none of them are necessarily having their funding removed, and they will simply have to compete with other community groups for the money.
We just need to make sure that we're getting value for money from council funds that go into the community in terms of the social outcomes that we're getting in relation to the amount of funding that's going into any activity, whether it be an early learning centre or whether it be something else.
The preschools have until the end of April to get their funding applications in, and we'll find out in August if they've been successful. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Conan Young.
Questions have been raised about the effectiveness of New Zealand's troop training efforts in Iraq, given the trainees are living without power and even running water. A US Defence Department report last year revealed the poor living conditions of the Iraqi troops were having a detrimental impact on morale, but the Defence Force today told a parliamentary committee that the New Zealand trainers are having an impact. Our Defence reporter Kate Pereira Garcia was at the hearing and joins us now from our Wellington studio. Kate, what do we know about the conditions for the Iraqi soldiers that our soldiers are training?
So they really are quite bad. So we know that they've got no running water, they've got no power in their camp barracks, they don't have a lot of equipment. So one example given was they got 300 M16 guns provided and only 7 cleaning kits, which obviously doesn't really equate to very much. A lot of the problem is corruption. So items are being sort of sent down the chain and not arriving. There's suspicions that some of that is going to militia groups that are illegally operating instead of to the troops that we're training, the official Iraqi army. I should point out, to be very clear, the New Zealand troops are not in these conditions. We run our own camps and we've got power and running water. Of course, it's still no picnic. It's 40 degrees and they're in full kit with weapons, but at least they've got some amenities.
So in terms of the kind of stuff that you were discussing that the Iraqi troops are dealing with, what is the impact reportedly on their morale?
That very much depends which side you speak to.
Yeah.
So our Defence Force say that it's a disturbance, but it's not having a major impact on morale. They say they're still able to carry out their training and that the Iraqi forces are still engaged in the training and learning from that and prospering and doing really well. Phil Goff, the Labour Defence spokesperson today, said that it's got to be having an impact. He said our Defence Force team will be working professionally, they'll be working hard, but that there's only so much they can do when the Iraqi forces will be living in these conditions and that will be impacting on them. The Defence Minister, Jerry Brownlee, is in Brussels today for NATO meetings, but the Prime Minister this afternoon said that the state of the Iraqi forces is really a matter for the Iraqi government and that that's not something that New Zealand has control over or should have control over even. I guess we'll find out more. There's a report that's being carried out at the moment into the effect, I guess, that we're having in Iraq and Taji, where we're training the troops. That's due out in March, so that'll give us a bit of a clearer idea.
Okay. What else was discussed at the Select Committee today?
So Phil Goff also took great delight in pointing out that Jerry Brownlee had given the Defence Force and the Defence Ministry a mark of 50%, which obviously is quite close to a fail, for his satisfaction with the advice that they were providing. He said that this is well below anything he's ever known a minister, including himself, obviously, to have given in the past. The Defence Force came back. They said, look, he was a new minister. He has a different way of doing things. We had to adapt to that. We've done that. We feel like we've improved, and he'd probably give us a higher mark next year.
They live in hope. Thanks, Kate. Kate Pereira Garcia, our Defence reporter. 6:22. As many as 100 Australian churches have promised sanctuary to 267 refugees facing imminent transfer back to Nauru after a recent High Court verdict. Now, 37 of them are just babies. Across the country, rallies and vigils have brought thousands of Australians together protesting under banners which read, "Let them stay." The Anglican Dean of Brisbane, Dr. Peter Catt, is leading the movement and has declared St John's Anglican Cathedral a place of sanctuary. I asked him how far he was prepared to go for the refugees.
I really am prepared to try and protect people from being taken from Australia to Nauru. I think one of the amazing things that has happened in the past week is that there are now thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are willing to stand with the churches and the schools and the medical professions, all of whom have said they are prepared to offer sanctuary. There are thousands of people who are prepared to stand with us. And so I guess a week ago I felt like I was putting my neck on a chopping block potentially. I have to say a week later I feel an incredible comfort that if it really does come to that there will be lots of people standing side by side with me.
You have declared St John's Anglican Cathedral a place of sanctuary.
That's right, yes.
And you are prepared to lock the building and see if the authorities would go as far as breaking down the doors to get to the people inside.
I guess that would be the extreme. I have every confidence that that wouldn't come to that. The Minister for Immigration has already said that they're not going to storm churches, so I imagine there'll be a more conciliatory and negotiated outcome. And we do have precedents for this. In the years when East Timor was in turmoil, a number of churches in Australia provided sanctuary for some East Timorese people who the government was planning to send to Portugal, I think it was. And those people were simply allowed to stay in the churches until the matter was resolved. So that would be my hope. I guess if it really did come to needing to lock people in and stand defiantly, we would do that too. But I have every confidence that the government is more interested in finding a positive way through this.
Why do you feel so strongly about it?
Well, it's the heart of the gospel, as I understand it, is that people should be allowed to flourish. We've spent years and years now advocating with the government to change the policy, particularly as it pertains to children. I'm the chair of what's called the Australian Churches Refugee Task Force, which is a group of 9 churches, 9 national churches that speak as one and have been trying for years now to shape the discourse in a more humane way. And it's really got to the point where we feel that that kind of advocacy has fallen on deaf ears, really, and so there was a need to take a stand. And the prospect that 270 people who are in Australia at present and are safe, and many of whom are in Australia because they were suffering some sort of mental trauma because they were on Nauru, the idea that those people who are safe here, they're already here, they're safe, the idea that they could be sent to Nauru was just heartbreaking, and so the time came for a stand to be made, and it really has captured the popular imagination. It's really turned into a movement where Australia is being turned into a sanctuary.
The first women to represent Māori in Parliament have been memorialised in the House. The portraits of Iri Akaratana and Whetu Tirikatini Sullivan have been unveiled in the former Māori Affairs Room. Te Manu Kōrehi reporter Lee Marama McLaughlin was there.
About 60 descendants of the late Iri Akaratana and Whetu Tirikatini Sullivan were welcomed into Mātangireia to see for the first time women gracing the walls. Te Haina Rātana Raumaiwa removed the black satin cover revealing her mother Iriaka's photograph.
It felt really wonderful. It was like a completion, because I'd been thinking about her for a wee while. In our life together, I was discussing it with Adrian a little while ago and said I just couldn't believe how she did what she did.
Iri Akaratana was the first woman to represent Māori in Parliament, having succeeded her late husband in the Western Māori seat in 1949. She held the post until she retired 20 years later. Her oldest surviving daughter, Ms Rātana Raumaiwa, says during that time she wasn't home a lot.
We knew that she loved us, and the time she did have with us, even if it was, giving us a message as far as getting things not right, they were done in a loving manner. She'd physically show you she loved you. And MP, no one could believe that she'd come home, she'd be cooking, she'd be cleaning, she'd be doing what any mother would do. She was very humble.
The black and white portraits join those of 6 other prominent Māori politicians. Hanging next to her father, Sir Iruwera Tirikatini, is the photo of Whetu Tirikatini Sullivan, who was the first female Māori cabinet minister. Her widower, Dina Sullivan, addressed the crowd.
Looking at Whetu's portrait up there alongside her dad brings back vivid memories, and it's holding back tears in a way. I never met her dad, and the first picture I saw of him was actually that one in University House. I was there as a PhD student from Sydney studying nuclear physics, nuclear. And I must admit I influenced Betty's approach to anti-nuclear New Zealand. But anyway.
Both women were followers of the Ratana faith and were remembered today as trailblazers of their time, and their influence is undeniable. Still representing Western Māori is Iriaka Ratana's grandson, Adrian Rurafe, for Te Taihoauru, and today's Southern or Te Taitonga MP is Reno Tirikatine, the nephew of Whetū Tirikatine Sullivan. For Checkpoint, ko Lee Marama McLaughlin TNA.
What a lovely way to end the program for tonight. Thank you, everyone. However you've been with us, listening or watching, we appreciate your company. We will be back at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Time for World Watch.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, hopes for peace in Syria anytime soon fade further. German investigators look at human error for a train crash, and a major discovery that could change our thinking about the universe. Those stories and more in World Watch PM. But first, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 506 people have died since the government launched a major Russian-backed assault on the city at the beginning of the month. Among the dead are 23 children who were reportedly killed in Russian airstrikes. Maria Zakharov of the Russian Defense Ministry has vehemently denied that Russia's airstrikes are responsible for the collapse of the Syrian peace talks in Geneva. And now, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has verbally admonished Washington for cozying up to the Syrian Kurdish group, the PYD. DW's David Shaw filed this report.
Tel Rifat, just north of Aleppo. Russian bombs hit the city. Internet video purports to show the latest offensive by the Syrian army and its ally Russia, a key player in the peace talks, causing a humanitarian crisis. We were forced to flee by the Russian bombings. My right foot was wounded. We need help for our children. We need places to stay. We need medicine for the children, clothes, food and medicine. The heavy fighting has put peace talks on hold. We are being blamed for the collapse of the talks, but this is a lie, a blatant lie. This is absolute disinformation in its lowest form. As the war continues to rage on the ground, the US has already backed down on its insistence that any peace deal must include an ouster of Russia's ally Assad, a major stumbling block for Washington. Russia's support of Assad has allowed so-called Islamic State to expand largely unopposed by anti-regime rebels. The US's anti-IS strategy relies on supporting Kurdish forces who control much of the border area between Turkey's Kurdish regions and Syria. They are engaged in territorial battles with IS, which controls large parts of the area to the east of Aleppo. Washington's alliance with the Kurds is now causing a growing rift with its other key ally in the conflict, Turkey. We say the PYD Kurdish rebel group is a terrorist organization. American officials are saying the PYD is not a terrorist organization. I call on America. How many times have I explained this to you? Are you on our side or the side of the terrorist PYD and PKK? Thursday's talks in Germany are set to be tough, with the diplomatic situation growing increasingly intractable. But they remain the only hope of peace for the displaced people and those trapped in besieged towns in war-torn Syria.
David Shaw. The French Parliament voted through controversial changes to the Constitution, allowing the government to strip French citizenship from those convicted of terrorist offences. The proposed package of measures also includes new conditions for a state of emergency. But the changes have been the subject of fierce opposition. Euronews' Catherine Hardy has our report.
Le scrutin est ouvert.
The majority of MPs in France's lower house of parliament have approved controversial amendments to the country's constitution in the wake of the terror attacks in Paris. The package of measures would enshrine emergency powers in the constitution and allow for terror convicts to be stripped of French citizenship. But the changes still need to be approved by the upper house and then finally confirmed by both houses with a 3/5 majority. The issue has sparked weeks of debate after French President François Hollande began pushing for constitutional reform after the terror attacks in the French capital in November that killed 130 people. Hollande declared a state of emergency after the attacks. That gives special powers to security services and police to carry out raids and arrests. The proposed amendment to Article 36.1 of the Constitution would allow for government to extend the state of emergency for up to 4 months. It would also prohibit the dissolution of the lower house of Parliament, the National Assembly, during a state of emergency. Separately, France is in the process of extending the state of emergency declared after the Paris attacks for another 3 months. It had been due to expire on the 26th of February. The second proposed constitutional change is more controversial. The addition of a new clause to Article 25 of the Civil Code would allow the French authorities to strip people convicted of terrorist offences of their French nationality. That measure was initially